Judy Garland faced a lot of harsh treatment in Hollywood, especially during her time with MGM Studios. Starting her career as a child, she was pressured to maintain a specific image that involved strict control over her weight and appearance. Studio executives reportedly put her on a restrictive diet and even provided her with pills to suppress her appetite and boost her energy, which contributed to her lifelong struggles with addiction. She was also overworked, filming for long hours with minimal rest, which took a toll on her mental and physical health. Garland later revealed that studio executives would make demeaning comments about her appearance, even calling her names to push her into conformity with Hollywood's beauty standards. This treatment led to her feeling insecure and anxious, and it left a lasting impact on her self-esteem. Despite her incredible talent, the mistreatment in Hollywood added significant strain to her life, leading to personal and health struggles that persisted until her passing. Garland's Hollywood journey was a heartbreaking example of how the industry exploited young, talented actors, especially women. From the age of 13, when she signed with MGM, she was thrust into a system that treated her more like a product than a person. Studio executives and handlers exerted control over almost every aspect of her life, from her weight and appearance to her schedule and even her relationships. One of the biggest challenges she faced was the intense scrutiny over her looks. Unlike other MGM starlets, Garland wasn't considered conventionally beautiful, so they subjected her to a regimen of extreme measures to change her appearance. For instance, she was forced to wear uncomfortable caps on her teeth and special devices on her nose to alter its shape. Studio heads even reportedly called her the Little Hunchback, an incredibly cruel nickname that severely impacted her self-image. This constant criticism about her looks and weight left her feeling insecure and unworthy, despite her undeniable talent. On top of that, MGM put her on a dangerous cocktail of drugs to maintain her hectic work schedule. They would give her stimulants to keep her energized during filming, then sedatives to help her sleep for a few hours before waking up to start again. This cycle led to an addiction that plagued her throughout her life. Even though she was often exhausted and unwell, the studio would force her to keep going. She would sometimes work up to 18 hours a day, with little regard for her physical or mental well-being. Her personal life was also impacted. The studio attempted to control her relationships, often manipulating her for publicity. They interfered in her romantic relationships and pushed her into marriages that might benefit her public image. This relentless control left Garland feeling isolated, contributing to her struggles with depression and anxiety. Despite the immense pressure and mistreatment, she continued to perform brilliantly, captivating audiences with roles in classics like The Wizard of Oz and A Star is Born. In her later years, Garland spoke candidly about the exploitation she endured, which helped expose Hollywood's darker side. Unfortunately, she never fully recovered from the years of mistreatment, and it ultimately affected her health and career. Her story serves as a tragic reminder of the toll that fame and industry pressures can take, especially on young stars who aren't adequately protected or supported. Judy Garland's story is deeply tragic and reveals the darker side of the Hollywood studio system at the time. The way she was treated went beyond professional pressure. It was psychological and physical abuse, especially considering how young she was when it all began. Hollywood in the 1930s and 40s was an environment where studios had almost total control over their stars, treating them like investments rather than human beings. Garland's story is one of the clearest examples of this. Growing up on set, she was constantly surrounded by adults who saw her as a commodity. Even as a child, she was encouraged to push past her own boundaries to fulfill what the studio wanted. The drugs she was given weren't just about stamina. They were about shaping her behavior and controlling her, molding her into the perfect product they wanted on screen. She was trained to smile through the pain and perform on cue, setting a dangerous precedent for how Hollywood could treat vulnerable young performers. This cycle of drug dependency, diet control, and sleep deprivation was part of a system that made her, and many young actors, struggle with a sense of self-worth and identity outside of their brand. Garland's relationships also suffered due to the studio's constant intrusion. Her marriages often crumbled under the weight of her personal struggles, which were largely a result of her Hollywood upbringing. For instance, her marriage to director Vincente Minnelli was in part a Hollywood-approved union, orchestrated to enhance her public image, and when her relationships fell apart, it only compounded her feelings of loneliness and insecurity. In the late 50s and early 60s, as her health declined and she struggled to get consistent work, Garland became emblematic of how the industry discarded stars who no longer fit the mold they created for them. Even though she was immensely talented, her struggles with addiction and mental health issues, which the studio system directly contributed to, made it difficult for her to find stability. By the end of her life, she was deeply in debt and struggling to maintain her career, with few of the people who had benefited from her success willing to help. Garland's story has influenced how Hollywood now approaches child actors and mental health, as her struggles were a wake-up call for the industry. She remains a symbol of resilience, having brought joy to millions despite the immense hardships she faced. However, her legacy also serves as a cautionary tale about the cost of fame, especially when it's forced on young performers without adequate support. In recent years, her life and experiences have spurred conversations about the need for accountability in Hollywood, mental health support, and the protection of young actors from exploitation. Judy Garland's journey in Hollywood was one of intense highs and devastating lows. From a young age, she captivated audiences with her talent, charisma, and unique voice. But behind the scenes, the pressures and abuses she endured were overwhelming. The studio executives saw her as a key asset, especially after her breakout role in The Wizard of Oz. But the innocence of Dorothy's character stood in stark contrast to the harsh reality Garland faced. During the production of The Wizard of Oz, Garland was only 16, but she was already being treated like an adult in terms of workload and the intense expectations around her appearance. The infamous diet the studio imposed on her wasn't just about keeping her thin. It was about molding her into an image of youth and purity, an unrealistic expectation that went beyond a typical child star role. Her diet reportedly consisted of chicken soup, black coffee, and cigarettes, and she was expected to lose weight continuously. The executives didn't allow her to eat regular meals, and she even had to hide food to avoid punishment. The studio's control extended into Garland's daily life. When she was exhausted, they would use whatever tactics necessary to get her on set, even if that meant pushing her to continue performing with serious injuries or while physically drained. The cocktail of pills, stimulants to keep her energized, sleeping pills to help her rest, created a cycle of dependency. By the time she was a young adult, she was already struggling with addiction, a pattern that would plague her for life. This wasn't a personal weakness or moral failing. It was a result of the relentless demands of the studio, which had started her on pills at an age when she was vulnerable and impressionable. Emotionally, Garland was caught between the love of her craft and the industry that manipulated her. She once mentioned feeling like she had lived 10 lives by the time she was 20, reflecting just how accelerated her life had been. The studio, rather than acknowledging her struggles, often publicly downplayed or even mocked her struggles with weight and mental health. Some executives suggested she was difficult or unreliable, rather than taking responsibility for the way they had mistreated and overworked her. In the 1950s, when her career hit a rough patch, MGM dropped her, a move that devastated her. She was no longer the young, bankable star they once cherished, and without the studio's backing, her career faced numerous hurdles. She turned to stage performances and concerts to earn a living, giving legendary, emotionally charged performances that hinted at the pain she carried. These concerts, particularly her famous Carnegie Hall performance in 1961, allowed her to reclaim some control over her career, even as her personal battles continued. Her later years were marked by financial instability and health problems. Garland often found herself in debt, sometimes performing just to survive. While she had loyal fans and admirers, few of the industry insiders who had benefited from her work stepped in to support her. Her early death at 47 was tragic, but almost inevitable given the toll Hollywood had taken on her. Garland's legacy as a pioneer in entertainment and a victim of Hollywood's darker side remains profound. She inspired generations of performers, but her story also changed conversations around the treatment of young stars, addiction, and mental health in the industry. Her life's challenges exposed the harsh realities behind the glitz and glamour and served as a wake-up call leading to a deeper awareness of the cost of fame and the need for change. Judy Garland's story is one of resilience in the face of unimaginable pressure and hardship, exposing the Hollywood studio system's ruthlessness during her era. She was one of the earliest and most vivid examples of how young, vulnerable talent could be exploited by an industry that prioritized profit and image over human well-being. When she joined MGM as a young teenager, Garland was often cast alongside more glamorous actresses like Lana Turner and Ava Gardner. Unlike them, Garland was typecast as the girl next door, and executives constantly criticized her looks, calling her ugly duckling or little hunchback. This typecasting affected her self-esteem for life. She was always being reminded that she didn't fit the idealized mold of beauty that Hollywood valued, despite her immense talent and charm. The diet pills and stimulants MGM forced on Garland affected her body and her mind. Over time, the amphetamines led to serious health issues, including exhaustion and chronic insomnia. As she grew older, the toll of this lifestyle led to erratic behavior, which the studio and media at the time blamed on her personally. Rather than supporting her, MGM executives labeled her as unprofessional, a stigma that followed her for years. The studio's lack of compassion extended to her mental health struggles as well. She was often treated as a problem rather than a person in need of help, and the industry saw her mental health issues as inconvenient rather than legitimate medical challenges. Her personal relationships, meanwhile, suffered immensely due to her constant work and dependence on medication. She had 5 marriages, each marked by turbulence, and many of her partners struggled to support her as she dealt with addiction and trauma from her Hollywood years. Her marriage to Sid Luft, who was also her manager for a time, led to some of her most celebrated performances in films like A Star is Born. However, even in this relatively supportive relationship, she was pressured to keep working despite her declining health. Luft helped organize her concert tours, which were grueling, but allowed her to connect deeply with her audience. These tours helped restore her sense of purpose, yet the rigorous demands only furthered her physical decline. Garland's children, particularly Liza Minnelli, have spoken openly about witnessing her struggles. They saw their mother as a dedicated performer, but also a woman damaged by years of exploitation. Garland's struggle to balance her love for her children with the demands of her career was painful for her. She often felt torn between providing for them and coping with her own health and emotional battles. Despite all these challenges, Garland was known for her unmatched talent and perseverance. Her performances were deeply emotional, revealing her ability to channel her struggles into art that resonated with audiences. Her famous performance of Over the Rainbow became not just a song, but a symbol of her longing for a world free from hardship. It became her signature song and an anthem for resilience, echoing her hope for a better life despite the challenges she faced. In the end, Garland's story raised awareness of the toll fame can take, especially for those who enter the industry young and face immense pressure without support. Her life spurred conversations about how young actors should be protected, leading to stricter regulations around child labor in the industry and greater awareness of the mental health needs of performers. Garland remains a legend not only for her talent, but also for the tragic example of what happens when the demands of Hollywood go unchecked. Her legacy has paved the way for change, urging the industry to be more compassionate, supportive, and mindful of the people behind the performances. Judy Garland's story is a poignant reminder of how the pressures of fame can lead to both extraordinary achievement and devastating personal cost. She was one of the most talented and beloved stars of her time, yet her life was filled with hardship. Her vulnerability, honesty, and relentless spirit made her relatable to many, and that emotional depth infused every performance. Born Frances Ethel Gum in 1922, she started performing at just 2 years old with her family's vaudeville act, the Gum Sisters. Her early years were marked by the constant hustle of show business. This early start meant she never experienced a normal childhood, as she was thrust into the entertainment world almost as soon as she could walk. When she signed with MGM at 13, her raw talent was undeniable, but she quickly encountered the studio's demanding, image-driven culture. From the beginning, the studios seemed to see Garland as a project to be managed. MGM subjected her to a rigorous, almost militaristic schedule. Besides filming, she was required to take dance and singing lessons, attend promotional events, and adhere to the studio's strict beauty standards. She was constantly reminded that her worth was tied to her ability to conform to the industry's expectations. The studio's manipulation of her self-image ran so deep that they even altered her natural appearance, applying caps to her teeth and contouring her face to appear thinner on screen. The cruelty she endured didn't stop with verbal criticism or physical demands. The studio's control extended to her social life as well. MGM reportedly assigned handlers to monitor her, even choosing who she could associate with. They wanted to prevent any distractions that might interfere with her work. In this environment, Garland was isolated, struggling to find meaningful relationships, while everyone around her treated her as a valuable asset, not a friend. Her attempts to form close connections were often overshadowed by the industry's manipulation and intrusion into her personal life. Garland's dependence on drugs was a direct consequence of the studio's relentless work schedule. Executives saw no issue with fueling her with amphetamines and barbiturates to keep her working, which created a cycle of dependency that was nearly impossible for her to escape. The pills helped her meet the grueling demands, but at a profound cost. As she grew older, this dependence affected her health, her mental state, and her ability to work consistently. It's heartbreaking to consider that the very pills she was given as a young starlet became lifelong shackles, impacting her ability to live and work freely. As she entered her 20s, Garland's struggles with addiction and mental health became harder to conceal. Despite her issues, she continued to work tirelessly, often delivering performances that were iconic and beloved. Films like Meet Me in St. Louis and Easter Parade showcased her range and magnetism, but each role also represented immense physical and emotional strain. When she was let go from MGM in 1950, it was devastating for her. The studio that had built her career effectively abandoned her when she became too difficult to manage. This dismissal was a huge blow to her, as it meant losing the only stability she'd known since childhood. In her post-MGM years, Garland attempted to rebuild her career independently. She staged successful concert tours, and her legendary performance at Carnegie Hall in 1961 is still remembered as one of the greatest live performances in music history. The concert was a triumph, showing audiences that her talent and resilience remained unmatched. However, her financial and health struggles continued to haunt her. Garland's independence from MGM allowed her to showcase her raw talent on her own terms, but she was now responsible for her career and financial survival, which put immense pressure on her. She was often in financial distress due to unpaid taxes, mounting medical bills, and legal battles over custody of her children. In her final years, Garland's physical and emotional state continued to decline. She faced periods of homelessness and was performing in small venues to make ends meet. Her health deteriorated, and the media often portrayed her as a tragic figure, focusing on her struggles rather than her talent. On June 22, 1969, at just 47, Garland passed away from an overdose in London, a tragic end to a life filled with triumphs and tribulations. Her death was mourned around the world, with fans and fellow entertainers recognizing the profound impact she had on the industry and on popular culture. Judy Garland's legacy is a complicated one. She left behind a body of work that continues to inspire generations, and her story has become a cautionary tale of the entertainment industry's impact on young performers. In the years since her passing, her life has inspired greater awareness of the need for ethical treatment. Judy Garland's marriages were deeply affected by her turbulent life and the pressures she faced in Hollywood. She was married 5 times, and each marriage brought its own set of challenges, often compounded by her ongoing struggles with addiction, mental health, and financial issues. Her relationships were intense, but often marked by instability and heartbreak. Here's a look at each of her marriages. Her first marriage was to composer David Rose in 1941, when she was only 19. MGM disapproved of the marriage, fearing it would harm her girl next door image, and pressured them to keep it a secret at first. Rose was supportive, but their relationship was strained by her demanding career and the studio's interference. After about 3 years, they divorced, partly due to their conflicting schedules and the pressures from MGM. Garland's second marriage was to director Vincente Minnelli in 1945. They met on the set of Meet Me in St. Louis, and Minnelli understood and appreciated her talent, which made her feel seen in a way she hadn't before. The two had one child together, Liza Minnelli, born in 1946. However, the marriage had its challenges. Minnelli was known to be a private and reserved person, while Garland's life was filled with emotional highs and lows. Their relationship eventually deteriorated, partly due to Garland's ongoing mental health struggles and Minnelli's struggles with his own personal life. They divorced in 1951, although they remained connected through their daughter, Liza. Her third marriage was to Sid Luft in 1952, and this relationship was one of the longest and most influential in her life. Luft took on the role of her manager and worked to revive her career, producing A Star is Born, one of her most iconic films. Together, they had two children, Lorna Luft and Joey Luft. Sid was protective and tried to support Garland's career, especially during times when she struggled with addiction and health issues. However, their marriage was also tumultuous and often violent, as Luft reportedly struggled with controlling behavior. They divorced in 1965 after 13 years of marriage, with Garland citing abuse as one of the reasons. Her fourth marriage was to actor Mark Herron in 1965. This marriage was short-lived, lasting only about 5 months. Herron supported her through some difficult times, but the relationship was fraught with conflict. Herron later revealed he was gay, which added complications to their marriage. They separated in 1966, though Herron remained a friend and support to Garland in the years that followed. Garland's fifth and final marriage was to musician Mickey Deans in 1969. He was a younger man who worked as a nightclub manager and initially seemed to offer her stability and companionship during a time when she was in poor health and struggling financially. They married in March 1969, just 3 months before her death. While their relationship had moments of happiness, it was also marked by her declining health and mounting financial struggles. Garland passed away in June 1969, just a few months after their wedding. Despite her love for her children and her genuine desire for stable relationships, Garland's marriages often reflected the chaos of her life in Hollywood. Her need for companionship and support was met with partners who, while well-intentioned, were unable to withstand the pressures she carried. Each marriage was a testament to her desire for love and stability, even though the challenges of fame, addiction, and health ultimately complicated her relationships. Judy Garland struggled with mental health issues throughout her life, partly due to the intense pressures of her career and the cycle of drug dependency she was pushed into as a child star. Her mental health challenges were exacerbated by Hollywood's demanding expectations and her personal hardships. She experienced periods of depression, anxiety, and what we would now likely recognize as symptoms of bipolar disorder. At various points, Garland sought professional help, including stays in sanatoriums and mental health facilities. In the late 1940s, Garland reached a breaking point. She had been under intense pressure for years, working nonstop with minimal support, and by 1947, she was overwhelmed by exhaustion and depression. She was sent to a sanatorium, which is an old term for mental health or rehabilitation facilities where people could receive care for psychiatric or physical conditions. During this time, she reportedly attempted suicide, which brought her mental health struggles into public awareness. After a stay in a psychiatric hospital, Garland tried to resume her career, but she continued to battle her inner demons, often turning to prescription drugs to cope with her emotional pain and physical exhaustion. Throughout her life, Garland would go in and out of hospitals and mental health facilities to seek help, especially during times when she struggled to control her addiction and deal with the trauma from her experiences in Hollywood. She received electroconvulsive therapy, ECT, which was a common but controversial treatment at the time. Though ECT was intended to help with severe depression, it also added to her physical and emotional stress. In the late 1950s, after MGM dropped her, Garland had a series of breakdowns as she faced a turbulent career and personal life. Despite the impact of these breakdowns, she continued to perform and connect with audiences, even though it was evident she was struggling. Her talent and passion for performance kept her going, but her mental health remained fragile until the end of her life. Judy Garland's mental health challenges were a tragic aspect of her life, reflecting the toll of the relentless pressure she faced from a young age. The way Hollywood treated her and its lack of support for her well-being highlighted the industry's harsh reality, which often prioritized profit over the person behind the talent. Today, her story has inspired more compassion and understanding of mental health in the entertainment world, paving the way for better support systems for actors facing similar struggles. There have been reports and allegations suggesting that Judy Garland experienced sexual harassment and assault during her time in Hollywood. The details about these incidents are sparse, as such matters were rarely documented or discussed openly during her era. However, in recent years, accounts have surfaced that Garland faced abuse and exploitation while working for MGM, especially as a young girl. One of the more disturbing stories involves allegations that some studio executives at MGM, including powerful figures like Louis B. Mayer, subjected Garland to inappropriate advances and harassment. Mayer reportedly acted as a mentor to Garland, but also allegedly crossed boundaries, sometimes making her feel uncomfortable with gestures that were overly familiar or inappropriate. Garland herself spoke about how Mayer would touch her in ways that made her uncomfortable, though she never fully elaborated publicly on the extent of this behavior. Garland was also vulnerable on movie sets, where she was constantly surrounded by adults who were largely focused on maintaining control over her career, image, and behavior. There are accounts suggesting she was harassed by other industry figures as well, though details remain unclear. At the time, young female stars often lacked the power to speak out against abuse or harassment, and the Hollywood system offered little recourse or protection for them. Additionally, Garland's story reflects the broader issue of exploitation of young actors in Hollywood, especially child stars who were often isolated from their families and controlled by powerful studio systems. This left them particularly vulnerable to predatory behavior from those in positions of power. The culture of the time discouraged victims from speaking out, and they were often dismissed as difficult or unstable if they voiced their struggles. Garland's experiences contributed to her lifelong feelings of insecurity, mistrust, and the mental health struggles she battled until her death. Today, her story is one of several that has contributed to discussions about the need for better protections and safeguards for actors, especially minors, in the entertainment industry. When Judy Garland moved to Hollywood at the age of 13 to begin her career with MGM, she was living with her mother, Ethel Gum, and her sisters. Garland's family had been performing in vaudeville before her film career took off, and they were very much involved in supporting her journey into the Hollywood studio system. So she didn't live on the set or by herself. She lived with her mother and siblings in various homes as they settled into life in California. In the early years of her career, Judy and her family lived in rented apartments or homes in the Los Angeles area. Her mother, Ethel, was heavily involved in her career, serving as both a manager and, in many ways, a controlling figure in Judy's life. Ethel often accompanied Judy to studio appointments and was a fixture in her daughter's professional life, especially as Judy navigated the pressure of being a young child star. While Judy was at MGM, the studio had a reputation for managing their young stars closely, but Garland's family was still a primary support system for her at that age. Judy's personal life, particularly during her teen years, was marked by the constant supervision of both her family and the studio system. As she got older, she would move out on her own, but throughout her early years in Hollywood, her family played a central role in her life and career. Her relationship with her mother was complex, with Ethel being both protective and demanding, pushing Judy to succeed while managing her career with a strict hand. Judy's mother later became less of a presence in Judy's life as Judy matured, but in her early teens, her family was the key part of her life outside of her work at MGM. The tragic reality of Judy Garland's early life and career is that her family, particularly her mother, Ethel Gum, was deeply complicit in the toxic and exploitative environment of Hollywood, though likely unaware of the full extent of the harm the studio system was inflicting. At the time, the entertainment industry was notorious for its ruthlessness, and young stars like Judy were seen more as assets to be controlled and molded than as children in need of proper care and protection. There are a few factors that contributed to why Garland's family allowed the studio to have such a profound influence on her, especially when it came to the drug use that started when she was just a teenager. 1. unrealistic expectations and pressure. Judy's family, particularly her mother, was desperate for success. Ethel had long hoped Judy would be the breakout star of the Gum Sisters, and when Judy was signed to MGM, it was seen as the realization of that dream. The family was likely overwhelmed by the glamour and pressure of Hollywood, and when MGM pushed Judy to take stimulants and diet pills to help her work longer hours and maintain a slim appearance, it may have been seen as just part of the business, a common but hidden practice at the time. For a young starlet, the pressure to comply with these demands, combined with the hope for greater success, made it difficult to say no. 2. MGM's influence. At the time, MGM and other major studios had near total control over the lives of their stars. They often took on the roles of both managers and guardians, particularly for child actors. These studios were known for pushing their stars to extreme limits, including dictating their work schedules, eating habits, and even their personal lives. The drugging of Judy, which began with the use of amphetamines to keep her energized during long shoots and barbiturates to help her sleep, was, unfortunately, not uncommon. For a family new to Hollywood, especially a family without the resources or knowledge to fight back, the studio's power was overwhelming. They may have believed that following the studio's directives was the way to ensure Judy's success, without fully understanding the long-term consequences. 3. The norm at the time. During this era, the use of prescription drugs in Hollywood was rampant, especially among young female stars. Studios routinely gave their actors stimulants to keep them thin, alert, and ready for the grueling demands of the industry. The idea that it was a normal part of being a star may have been part of the reason why Judy's family didn't intervene. Judy herself, as a young teen, may not have had the knowledge or ability to advocate for herself in a world that saw her as a commodity. Her mother, too, was probably not equipped to see the long-term damage these practices would cause, especially considering the times. 4. Ethel Gum's role. Judy's mother was known to be fiercely ambitious for her daughter, pushing her to succeed. Ethel was also reportedly very controlling and involved in every aspect of Judy's career. While it's clear she loved her daughter, Ethel's drive to push Judy into success, coupled with the lack of awareness about the dangers of Hollywood's methods, likely clouded her judgment. Ethel's own need for validation from Judy's success may have led her to prioritize Judy's career over her well-being. It's also worth noting that, at the time, child and adolescent stars were often seen as incapable of understanding the full impact of the decisions being made on their behalf. It wasn't until much later that the effects of the studio system on the mental and physical health of young stars, especially in relation to drugs and exploitation, began to be fully understood and openly discussed. Judy Garland's tragic story is a stark reminder of how the entertainment industry's treatment of young stars, particularly those who came from humble beginnings, could be both damaging and abusive, often without the intervention of those closest to them. There are reports suggesting that Judy Garland was pressured into having an abortion by Hollywood studio executives during her career. One of the most well-known instances was during her marriage to her second husband, director Vincente Minnelli. Garland became pregnant while they were married, but according to Garland's own accounts, MGM pressured her to terminate the pregnancy in order to protect her career. At the time, Garland was in her early 20s, and the studio's main concern was that a pregnancy would interfere with her work schedule and ability to continue making films. This was during an era when Hollywood studios often prioritized the careers of their stars over their personal well-being, and female stars in particular were expected to maintain a certain image of youth and availability. Garland, already struggling with her physical and mental health, was reportedly coerced into having the abortion. She later spoke about how emotionally devastating the experience was, as she wanted to have the child, but felt that she had little choice in the matter due to the pressures from the studio. In addition to this, Garland's earlier pregnancies were also marred by similar pressures from the industry, and she had a series of personal and professional challenges that left her vulnerable. The sense of control that MGM and other Hollywood executives had over her life, dictating not just her career, but her reproductive choices as well, highlights the exploitation and abuse that young female stars often faced in that era. While Garland's story is one of the most well-known, it was unfortunately not unique in the entertainment industry at the time. Many women in Hollywood during the mid-20th century were subjected to similar pressures, and their personal lives were often shaped by the demands of a system that treated them as commodities rather than as individuals with autonomy over their own bodies. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe for more content, and leave a comment below. See you next time.